Let's welcome Mr. Martin George, and he is the chairman of the Tobago Business Chamber. Good morning and welcome, sir.
Yes, hi. Good morning, Brother B. Good morning, Mr. Cox. Good morning, Tobago, and compliments of the season to all of you. And very interesting conversation you had there, Brother B, in terms of the jazz, because I'll tell you, the years that it was run by CL Financial, I think those were the best ever jazz years, those 3 years that they had it running. And we definitely have to look at getting the corporate investment and the corporate backing, and maybe even having the corporate, running of the event as they did. And I think that will bring it back to where it was. Because let me tell you, Tobago was positioned on a trajectory to have the best jazz festival in the entire Caribbean. I mean, we had friends who would fly in from Sweden, from Germany, from Australia, from all over for that Tobago Jazz when it was at its peak. And I think that's where we need to get back to. And the only way you can do that is by having it properly organized, managed, staged, presented. And I think you definitely need to get the persons with the expertise, the financial backing, the knowledge, the know-how, the industry contact to be able to do so. So therefore you can attract international artists and bring them. Because let me tell you, concerts are big ticket items. Look at Taylor Swift with her Eras tour. Look at how much money she has, garnered from her tour. Look at Beyonce when she did her tour. I understand Rihanna is planning to do a tour. So let me tell you, the concert business is big business, and that's how you create these monsters in the USA like Ticketmaster, whereby they control so much. And we need to understand that we have to step up our game. This is not just a local scene or a local scenario. It's international heavyweights you are basically jostling with. To be able to get these artists to get their time, their commitment, you need to have the attorneys on board who know and understand these international contracts, who understand copyright law, the laws in relation to, how you are able to lock down these artists in terms of a commitment, to be able to take legal action if they don't live up to their commitments, not to allow them to run off with our money, after we pay them and they don't show up. I mean, we've had those kinds of scenarios. So we need to understand that, look, this is not child's play anymore. You are talking international concert arenas. So therefore, we need to step up our game. And I think it's quite possible for us to do so. But we need to get the right expertise, financial backing, and corporate, influence on board.
Excellent. All right. So and I'm glad that you weighed in on the conversation we had prior. However, you're not here to speak to that this morning. And thank you, though. I respect and thank you very much. Mr. George, all right, let's get into it. Obviously, these two bills that were presented on Monday in the House, one of them successful. However, they need to work in tandem. Let's speak to the last-minute rush by the Chief Secretary, and we'll get into, well, just give us an overview as to the outcome of these two bills.
Well, you see, Brother B, I think part of where the dichotomy exists is the question of what is being presented and what Tobagonians want or what they understand or appreciate to be this idea of autonomy. And I could do this simply. I could ask you, Brother B, what do you understand or want in terms of autonomy?
Well, clearly, the first amendment that the Chief Secretary put forward was equality of status. And that, for me, will take care of everything.
Right. And then, you see, now, even that, it's a nice sounding catchphrase. But when you say equality of status, is it that we are going to create a federal state system whereby you have two federal states? Because if you can't create Tobago as a federal state by itself, if you understand me. So it means you have to change the entire constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, you have to throw that out. You have to now establish Tobago as a federal state, Trinidad as a federal state, then you now have to have separate federal constitutions for each one. Then you need to have an overarching national constitution. So I mean, the changes and ramifications and implications are so enormous that I'm not sure our leaders have delved down into the details to really give that clarity to the public. So as a result, the ordinary persons on the street, they will have so much confusion because some people are talking secession, some people talking, independence. Okay, what does independence mean in that sense? Independent from who? And you see, if you start to use those words, then questions will arise. Okay, so are you also going to ask for financial independence? In other words, you can't be saying that you want to be independent and yet still every year you're coming to me in Trinidad asking me for $4 billion or $3.5 billion. I will say, well, hey, I thought you were independent. Why you still need to come back? You understand me? So I mean, I don't mean to minimize the thinking of persons who have been advocating for these ideas. All I'm saying is that there's been a massive oversimplification of the concepts, because I'm sure Mr. Cox may have his own view as to what autonomy means for him or what he is thinking of in terms of autonomy.
But what about the idea that, okay, so these since 2021, it came to the floor and was debated, and the GSC was formed, and the GSC went through, get the necessary support in terms of international experts chiming in and stuff. There's an argument, particularly coming from the PNM Tobago Council side, stating that, here's what, we should have accepted what is proposed now, and then we can move forward as the time go along, as opposed to blocking the progress to get some sort of greater autonomy. What is your take on that argument?
Right, but you see, Mr. Cox, we also have to be students of history. And that's why I always say on this program, I'm not just a student of law, I'm a student of history also. Because if you recall, when the UNC was in power, they had prepared a bill which gave wide and sweeping powers to Tobago, and the PNM, who were in opposition, who blocked it at that time. If you understand me. So, we have actually been the victims of this type of political shenanigans by our leaders, in that when they are on one side of the fence, they claim and, trumpet and, call for certain things. But then when the shoe is on the other foot, you see their positions change and they say, well, we can't support this because, ABC. And that's exactly the conundrum that Tobagonians have been placed in for decades, I could actually say, with this whole idea of the autonomy and the greater independence, and some people say secession and, all these things. And I think we really need to probably do a reset. We need to do a reset, Brother B, in terms of how we look at this whole idea. And that's why I have urged and I have, tried to politely suggest we need to start thinking differently. If, for instance, we start developing our own resources in terms of, say, for instance, just something as simple as our energy grid. Look, last night, there was a major blackout in Tobago, right? Because we are dependent on this massive cable coming from Trinidad that then feeds to the Cove, and then from Cove, they distribute it throughout Tobago. So if you have any disruption there, Tobago, in terms of electricity, is always a problem, right? If we were to say, okay, let's start putting our massive wind turbines throughout Tobago. We have so much wind energy. But when you travel, I know you would see these massive wind turbines all across Europe, where they generate their own electricity, right? You have so many opportunities for that. So then we can now start saying, hey, listen, Trinidad, we don't really need to get electricity or as much electricity supply from you because we are generating our own. We could use the wave action. Look at how you have such strong waves off so many coasts in Tobago. There are wave action devices that generate electricity. There's solar electricity. We don't have any solar farm in Tobago. So I mean, we have to start thinking outside the box, brother B. So in other words, instead of us beating the same drum, autonomy, 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 and you don't even know where you're really ending up with autonomy because everybody has a different idea, so it's like an old mass band, everybody playing a different character. Some is Jab Jab, some is Moko Jumbi, some is Laja Bless, some is, Dem Loren, if you understand me, some is Borokit, and it's all a discordant cacophony of sound, and what it represents is a genuine desire by many Tobagonians for maybe a greater say in their own self-determination, and that's fine. But all I'm saying is maybe we can start approaching it from a different angle because I think the politicians are going to continue playing Tobagonians for fools years and years to come because it suits their purpose to do so in this political football.
All right, just quickly, and of course, there's a new approach proposed by the Chief Secretary, and that's to go to the UN. And he said that's first priority on their list from the Executive Council to spend whatever it costs to have UN or bring in international help.
Well, I mean, the absurdity of such an idea is, I mean, it doesn't even merit any major discussion because if you're talking the United Nations, Tobago is not a member of the United Nations. So you don't even have the basis to approach them. Trinidad and Tobago is a member. And we need to understand that Tobago is not a nation by itself. So let's not even, I mean, let me tell you, you see, these nice sounding ideas, I think they are only designed to attract the attention of the dull and the ignorant who are not able to do the disaggregation and the analysis to be able to say, but hey, listen, that sounds like nonsense because you don't even have the locus standi to be able to approach them in any meaningful or sustainable way to have any audience with them in that regard.
But what would happen in terms of, well, of course, we know there's an election year coming up in 2025, but what would happen from the THA standpoint in terms of probably doing these consultations and bringing it back as a motion in the Assembly legislature to then present again? Would that make sense, or there's a different approach that would need to be inclusive of the GSC and so on to make this autonomy bill conversation remain at the tip of the tongues of our leaders?
The THA doesn't have power to make laws which have national effect. So you could discuss it there, I mean, till the cows come home. That doesn't have any impact. It still has to go to the national parliament for ratification and approval. So, I mean, again, you see, I don't like being so frank, on these issues, but it pains me to see sometimes our leaders try to, give these misleading ideas or misleading impressions to the population with these nice sounding phrases, we're going to the United Nations, we're going to World Bank, we're going and take this international, really? Let's be serious about these things, because if you're talking about areas of international law, then you're talking, okay, what treaty does Tobago have internationally? Tobago does not have any international treaties. Tobago is not a signatory to any of these international bodies. So therefore, it's Trinidad and Tobago. So therefore, you as Tobago alone, you can't approach them.
But then what is the guarantee? I guess there's no guarantee in terms of bringing it back onto the order paper for it to be debated in Parliament. I mean, consultations could occur. The approach that the Chief Secretary said he's going to do, if somehow it works, what are we, as the people, left to just hope and have a high degree of optimism that this would return as a high priority post-general elections and even post-THA elections, Mr. George?
Mr. Cox, I'm going to be, I always like to bring things from a different perspective. And my question to Tobagonians would be, what is it you really want when you speak of autonomy? And I think that answer is going to be key to determining the way forward. Because I think if you ask 9 or 10 random Tobagonians across the board, you may get 9 or 10 different answers as to what each person thinks of it. And that's where I think the problem begins. And that's where the politicians are able to make full mass of this issue.
All right. Mr. George, lastly, you spoke about, and this is your pet peeve, basically, for financial independence for Tobago. You mentioned the turbines and other things. Let's quickly, as we get ready to wrap, and this will be my last question, how do we earn or gain financial independence in Tobago? What investments do we need to make?
All right, okay, so the thing is, I mean, we need, okay, for instance, we need to start pushing for the central government to repeal the Foreign Investment Act. Because, you see, let me tell you, Brother B, there's so many people in Trinidad and Tobago who don't understand the implications of that act. That act applies to Tobago only, you know. So, in other words, it only blocks direct foreign investment in Tobago. So let's start with that. So in other words, that should be something that should be at the top of the THA's agenda. To always be pressuring and calling on the central government, repeal this act. Let's start to get direct foreign investment back into Tobago. But you remember prior to 2008, you used to have persons from Sweden, from Germany, you know, from Scandinavia, coming and looking at Tobago to say, well, okay, I want to put on a guest house, I want to put on a hotel, I want to put on... We have none of that anymore. And it's all because of this legislation. So, I mean, that's the low-hanging fruit that we could start with. You know, then of course there are other ideas you could look at, say for instance, push for legislation to say, hey, listen, let's ask and see if we can push to have Tobago declared a VAT-free zone and a duty-free zone. If you think of, say for instance, the duty-free zones in Panama, and you see how much business is generated, billions of dollars are generated there because of those duty-free zones. All right, you have them also in the Dutch Caribbean islands also. So these are things that can be done, right? If Tobago becomes a VAT-free zone, you know how many Trinidadians will now want to come and retire in Tobago because it means your cost of living is automatically reduced by 12.5%. It means, therefore, that persons are going to want to rush to invest in Tobago because they'll say, hey, listen, yes, this is a destination we want to be in. So we have to start thinking differently. I mean, you know, we know that, of course, implementing these things will not be simple or easy, but we have to take a different approach because this idea of simply going to the national parliament and saying, well, we're begging you, give us autonomy, give us autonomy, give us autonomy, it really has not yielded the results that people are hoping for. So all I'm saying is maybe we could start looking at things from a different perspective, take a different approach, and then maybe the very autonomy and independence you want will come as a bonus.
Excellent. Mr. George, we want to thank you very much for being with us this morning. And always a pleasure. And of course, love the way you articulate your issues. With that, again, Merry Christmas. We come into Parang.
Thank you. And the same to both yourself and Mr. Cox. And keep flying the flag for Tobago on this program.
Very good. All right.